Hello and what is up YouTube? My name is G3 Iron and today we are in our 5th episode of our weekly featured build discussion. We are talking today about Hollyphantom's Flicker Strike Slayer. If you have never played Flicker Strike, I will simply give you the recommendation that a veteran player gave me when I first began playing Path of Exile. And his quote as we were farming the Dried Lake at that point was that if you haven't played Flicker Strike yet, don't worry, you will play it at least one time throughout your career and throughout your gameplay in Path of Exile, and you won't regret it. It will be one of the most fun gameplay builds that you can experience in Path of Exile. And he was absolutely right. I loved my time playing Flicker Strike. And one of the things that I want to do today in our featured build guide discussion was highlight a build guide that allows you to actually level relatively early on, starting at level 28 with Flicker Strike. Now, for those of you who are new to the channel, you can of course like, subscribe, and ding the bell for more discussions just like this one. And for those of you who are veterans of the channel, welcome back. You know the routine. There are video description timestamps down below my slightly elongated beard, so you can check those out, jump to gameplay, jump to the passive tree, or jump to any part of the discussion that you would so desire. So, Flicker Strike leveling from level 28. Is it possible? First, we're going to take a look at what the end game version of a Flicker Strike build done by Hollyphantom looks like. So here is the end game version. This is in maps. This is in a level 75 Necropolis map. The zone area is level 75, and you can see he pops a Legion. This was done back in 3.7, and you can see the character teleports all around because Flicker Strike as a skill literally was first designed as a movement skill to warp you or to teleport you to your next enemy, but it would require that you consume a frenzy charge along the way. This particular style of gameplay lends itself to a one-button sort of pushing gameplay. You know, you can also smash your flasks if you want extra DPS or extra defenses as well. But for the most part, once you've got your auras running and you're inside a map, you can pretty much just press one button as long as there are enemies within range, and your Flicker Strike will teleport you to the enemy and simultaneously kill the enemy, and then you will continue to repeatedly Flicker Strike, bouncing around the map as quick as you can go. Now, there is a way to do this relatively early on now, thanks to a couple of different updates. This is a level 28 character that Hollyphantom shows off inside the regular aqueducts right at the beginning of Act 4, showing off that you can, in fact, use Flicker Strike while you are leveling. One of the biggest drawbacks by far to playing Flicker Strike is that it has been labeled pretty much and restricted an end game skill, that you're pretty much held up to playing the build once you hit level 68. And this is because of this particular required unique, which is called the Red Trail, which for the most part people have needed to use in order to get their sustain for Flicker Strike going. Because of the mechanics of Flicker Strike, because you always need to have a frenzy charge to then consume on Flicker Strike, one of the workarounds for this is that while you have the Red Trail going, and then while you also are using the Golden Rule Viridian Jewel, bleeds that you inflict reflect back on you, and the Red Trail reads that you gain a frenzy charge on hit while you are bleeding. So essentially, you're bleeding yourself between the Golden Rule and the Red Trail, and this means that while you're constantly bleeding, you're constantly generating frenzy charges while you're constantly hitting, and so therefore you set up this loop where you never run out of frenzy charges and you can always flicker around. But the problem for this is that the Red Trail requires level 68. Good luck leveling with Flicker Strike if you're not able to have this set up. However, thanks to 3.9, we have the following update from Hollyphantom. Slayer's Endless Hunger now causes you to be unaffected by bleeding while leeching, which is a change rather than being immune. This makes self-bleed perma-flicker builds extremely easy to build using the Red Trail plus Golden Rule. This is a good option after level 68. So, how is it that you can actually relatively consistently level with this from level 28? Well, very simply, you're going to use this particular unique, which is called Lakishu's Blade. Please feel free to correct me if I'm butchering that pronunciation here down below. This particular sword is a sword that gives your socketed gems supported by level 1 multi-strike. Basically, because we can now hit things multiple times, it means that we've got a chance to generate frenzy charges every single time that we are hitting, which is massive. So the exact wording on this is simply this. You want to try to get one that is 3-linked, a 3-linked version of the sword, or you can craft it yourself if it's not already 3-link. And then you want to go through this particular process. Inside Lakishu's Blade, you want to socket Flicker Strike, Melee Splash, and Melee Fizz. That's your main skill. Okay? Starting in 3.7, your Melee Splash isn't needed as a socketed skill, but you know, it's nice if you want to do that if you're leveling, let's say, with a Tabula, but if you're using Lakishu's Blade, then you get that free on there as well. So, you'll also need Frenzy and Blood Rage. These two particular supports are very, very helpful as you're leveling, because Frenzy is going to give you Frenzy charges when you happen to actually run out of Frenzy charges, when and if that happens. Again, this isn't permanently set up as you are leveling at super early levels, but the percentage chance that you will get a frenzy charge is relatively high, and when you don't actually get one as you're flickering, it essentially reverts the build into a 2-button build instead of a 1-button build, which for players who have wanted to play Flicker Strike and level with Flicker Strike, that is an infinite improvement to the options that we had for leveling with it before. Of course, Blood Rage also provides a 25% chance to gain a Frenzy charge on kill, which as you're killing stuff either with Frenzy or with Flicker Strike means you're getting those Frenzy charges back. This is very, very strong. When you combine all of these together, you've got a great amount of chance, much higher than 35 to even 40% chance if you've got everything running on every single kill getting a Frenzy charge back, which means every single kill is 40% chance that you're going to get a frenzy charge and be able to go kill something else with that expended frenzy charge off of your Flicker Strike. So, all of this being said, this is a fantastically written guide. I cannot recommend this particular version of this guide enough. Now, it's not very often that we recommend in our featured build discussions guides that focus on early game progression, how to actually progress your character. But there's a whole bunch of players out there right now during Metamorph League, during 3.9, who are either coming in and trying out Path of Exile for the first time because maybe they're on holiday break, maybe they've just got a little bit of extra time, maybe they got a gift card to spend on Steam points, or maybe they got a gift card specifically for grinding gear games, and maybe this is a build that they've never played before. A lot of players out there, myself included, as a self-confessed altaholic who levels up way too many characters when there's a great league, and by the way, this is a great league to level up multiple characters, Metamorph. When we want to level with a character, oftentimes we want to use our endgame skill as soon as possible, so that way we get a flavor for what it is that we are going to be interacting with. And this particular build will take you through very easy and clear guided steps on how to set up your duelist, even all the way down to telling you exactly where you get each and every gem that is described in this particular build. There is not a better written guide on the forums, I mean that sincerely, to actually walk you through early game progression. So maybe you're a new player and you're looking for a beginner's guide or an early guide on how to get into Path of Exile and how to level. There's even a leveling section on this particular guide that Hollyphantom's got, I believe, that's going how to level from level 1 to 28 when you don't have Flicker Strike. And they go in and show you exactly what to do, which is really, really helpful, because a lot of guides won't tell you what to do until you get to your main skill. They'll simply leave it up to you and assume that you know. So this is very, very helpful as a guide, and it's very well written and very well presented. Hopping over onto the path of building, onto the passive tree, one of the things that you'll notice is different is, of course, this is a relatively early game setup. So this setup is only set up with 37 passive points spent onto this character, because it's not an end game version of this particular build. There's plenty of various Slayer builds out there if you want to play a Flicker Strike and play Slayer. Again, highly recommend it, but if you want to get to the end game and still use Flicker Strike, there's not going to be a better leveling guide than Hollyphantom's level 28 leveling Slayer Flicker Strike build. So a couple of things that you're going to want to do early on. You're going to want to path down to Master of the Arena as quickly as possible. This gives you some regen as well as some weapon range, and then you're going to come through Bravery, which gives you increased evasion, armor, and life, down through Art of the Gladiator, which is really helpful between accuracy and attack speed. And then you're going to make your way down through Golem's Blood, which is one of the better life nodes on the entire tree. It gives you some regen as well as just some flat life. The regen is going to be important for you early on while you're using Blood Rage, because Blood Rage early on actually does kind of hurt your character if you don't have a way to sustain yourself. So combining Golem's Blood with Blood Rage is a nice way of at least somewhat mitigating the percentage amount of damage that you are taking from Blood Rage. Then you'll make your way on over here to Blade Dancer, which gives you a good chunk of increased damage with skills. The total on this particular tree at the end is 6% increased attack speed with swords, 24% increased damage with swords, and then enemies have -10 to total physical damage reduction against your hits. So this is kind of like another way of penetrating essentially enemy defenses, of ignoring enemy defenses while you are attacking a particular enemy. And of course, because we're Flicker Strike, we're attacking very, very quickly. You will then branch out your particular spine of your build towards this node called Graceful Assault, which gives you 20% increased attack damage, 30% increased evasion during onslaught. Then it also gives you 20% increased onslaught effect and 10% chance to gain onslaught for 4 seconds on kill. Now you might say that's kind of lame because it's only a 10% chance and it only lasts for 4 seconds. However, I will simply point this out to you. If you can kill 100 enemies in the course of 4 seconds, which with Flicker Strike is not only a normal thing, that should be like a base minimum thing. As long as there's 100 enemies in a dense enough area, you're going to kill them, which means you're going to have onslaught, which means you're attacking faster, which means you're killing faster, which means there's more stuff that you're killing and more chances for you to gain onslaught and continue that. So it's a wonderfully, wonderfully well-tooled build that gets you stacking your attack speed as quick as possible. Honed Edge gives you some more increased damage with swords and attack speed with swords. The endgame version of this particular build, Hollyphantom, likes to use some particular unique swords called the Dream Feather. The Dream Feather is a setup that gives you a whole bunch of damage and attack speed and boosts you based on the amount of dexterity that you are stacking. The skill setup for this particular build is using Flicker Strike, of course, socketed inside a low-level Lakishu unique sword, which is going to give you level 1 multi-strike, as well as socketing in Flicker Strike, melee physical, and melee splash. Other than that, you're going to use Leap Slam and faster attacks in order to get around when there's not a pack that you can flicker to. You will then also use Herald of Purity along with Herald of Ash. One thing that I really, again, appreciate about Hollyphantom's build is that right here inside Path of Building, he's even got the levels, the particular levels that you're going to be looking for on these particular active skills, which means when you're over here looking at the DPS on your Flicker Strike, it's actually somewhat accurate. A lot of the times a player might go in and make a POB for an end game build and then forget as they're leveling to actually move the gems around to appropriate levels. 630 average attack damage per hit, over the course of each second. Like, that's fantastic. You have 7 attacks per second. That is absolutely ridiculous, the amount of times that you are hitting. And remember, stacking your Blood Rage with your Flicker Strike percentage chance on hit to simply gain back those frenzy charges, you are going to be generating a whole bunch of frenzy charges. And when Flicker Strike or on kill effects don't actually give you frenzy charges, you've always got frenzy to fall back on, which frenzy is set up here simply on a 3-link between frenzy, melee physical damage, as well as ruthless. Now, the last thing that I want to point out on this particular build is the items. The items here, if you want to go endgame, is actually going to be the Dream Feather. The Dream Feather sword, you can double use these, and these Dream Feather swords are simply great when you stack them up as you fill out your endgame tree. Dream Feather reads like this. It adds a flat amount of physical damage. It also gives you a flat amount of increased attack speed on the sword. Again, that's all local per sword. So a lot of the time, players who use Dream Feathers will use 2 of them. But it also gives you, at the very end of it, it gives you increased movement speed, which is nice. But at the very end of it, it gives you 1% increased attack damage per 450 evasion rating. So as you continue to stack dexterity, which gives you a whole bunch of evasion, and you continue to fill out your tree, giving yourself a whole bunch of evasion, you are going to also give yourself a whole bunch of damage to actually finish off all of the enemies that you are flickering to and jumping back and forth to, thus ending any monsters that could possibly be in front of you. Lastly, I will simply say this. Because Metamorph is a boss-killing league, a lot of you out there who are veterans are going to say, oh yeah, but Iron, what about the fact that this is a boss-killing league and Flicker Strike isn't good for killing bosses because you can't sustain the flickers. You have to sustain them off of a kill effect. Well, by the time you get to endgame, you can always switch back over to the Red Trail plus the Golden Rule. And even though you're a Slayer, remember that you are now unaffected by bleeding while leeching, which we're going to be leeching the whole time as we're a Slayer once we've ascended up to that particular point, rather than being immune. So we can use the Red Trail, we can use the Golden Rule, and we can still get those Flicker Strike charges, those Frenzy charges back on hit, rather than on kill. So not only is this essentially a build that is going to allow you to clear maps and to move around incredibly quickly, this is also going to be a build that is going to excel in killing metamorphs, even solo solitary bosses like the Conquerors of the Atlas at the end of every Wattstone cycle as you progress your Atlas. So this was Hollyphantom's Flicker Strike Slayer. Of course, drop me a comment down below. Maybe you're like that POE veteran who recommended to me to play a Flicker Strike build at least once, and I myself am leveling up with this exact character right now in 3.9 with a Slayer of myself called Blue Eyes White Dragon. I can't believe I got that character name either, by the way. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope today is the day a Mirror of Calandra drops for you, and I look forward to reading all of your comments about the various Flicker Strike shenanigans that you've been able to pull off with your builds. Thanks for watching that video. If you'd like more information on any of our discussion points today, you can see them down below in the video description. If you'd also like to join our Discord or support our Patreon, you can do so with the links down below. Thanks again, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.